last thing we wanted to get into, which was Sunbreak Ranch. So for years, George Mullen, he's this kind of artist guy. He had this thing for a while. He wanted the city of San Diego to take on a new motto of the city of life. And he had a bunch of drawings about how that would look and feel.
He's an artist, really?
Yeah. And he's a business guy and, service club type guy. He had this idea to create Sunbreak Ranch, and for a while it was the focus of it was we're going to build this giant ranch or camp out in the middle of nowhere in the desert or near Otay Mesa or near Brown Field or whatever, and we're going to concentrate the homeless people out in this camp.
Interesting word choice there.
Yeah. Picked up on it, huh? So the people would be allowed to leave, but there'd be tons of services. He said in one of his op-eds in January, he said, it will be a creative, one-of-a-kind location featuring 35-plus amenities and benefits that strive to make the ranch the best possible temporary home for our homeless fellow citizens. And so they estimate the cost of this at $275 million. Now, this was something that he talked about for years. And I think over the last about 2 years, year and a half or so, it's really started to gain traction. And in part because he started to focus on one site in particular, Miramar. So Miramar Marine Corps Air Station is the site of a lot of dreams of San Diego. We dreamt for a long time of putting an airport there. That didn't work out.
God, that would be nice.
So it's where dreams go to die.
Yes.
Okay.
The
It's
airport.
where dreams go to be exploded by unexploded ordnance.
Yeah. And the Marine Corps, for instance, heavily opposed putting an airport there and did not want any part of that discussion. And coincidentally, it died a very ugly death at the ballot in 2006, I think that was.
R.I.P.
It was like 70-30 or something. It was very poorly received by the San Diego voters. Anyway, the idea to put this giant facility on, I think, 500 acres of land is what they thought about in that Marine Corps Air Station was going forward. It started to get a lot of support from Bill Walton, the NBA legend, a lot of local philanthropists, Malin Burnham, Tom Sudbury. A lot of these guys said, like, okay, this sounds good. We're in. We'll create a place where they can go. Now, I've always had a little bit of trouble with it, and I never really wanted to talk about it because it does have the feel of a concentration camp, right? Get people.
But it says right here there are 35 plus amenities.
Yes, you get people.
What would count as an amenity? Is that like a water fountain?
I think rec centers and like doctors, clinics, dentists, all kinds of stuff, and they would have all that out there. But yeah, it did feel like you were going to concentrate people in a camp far away. Mm-hmm. That doesn't feel very good. Now, they'd say anytime you'd have an argument like that, they'd say, well, we're not going to require people to be there. But that brings up the question like, okay, well, why would they go there? They're not going to go even 12 miles away to this thing. And, they want to, they're people. They want to be around service. They want to be around jobs. They want to be around other people. They want to be around all libraries and parks. They want to be in cities. That's why they're there. And they're going to want to do that. What would keep them there? And they'd say, well, we're going to enforce more harshly even the rules that they cannot be encamped anywhere in San Diego. So that was how it sort of stood. But it started to build a lot more support. It started to get a lot more support when they focused on this area that was a little bit closer in Miramar. Well, 2 weeks ago, the Marine Corps commanding officer at Miramar Marine Corps Air Station sent a letter to the mayor basically saying, not here, that it has unexploded ordnance on the ground, that the firing arc of test ranges and firing ranges reaches into all these areas. In other words, a bullet could come out of nowhere at any time, or some sort of missile or some sort of other ammunition could easily come into the area and kill people who were at this camp.
Mm-hmm.
I was in favor of the airport idea, but now that I know that they're just kind of missiles flying around, maybe it's not the best idea.
Well, that
I
was
wish
one of
he
the
wrote it the way you just said it. That would have been much more compelling.
Yeah.
I don't know if he did, but
no.
not that I remember.
No, I mean, that was one of the concerns that the Marine Corps brought up about the airport. They're like, you can't have these military uses here and an airport right next to it. Like, there's just too many things going on.
Wow, I suddenly got so much anxiety.
So the other thing they pointed out, that 4 planes had crashed in that area over the last
More
20
anxiety.
years. And there were all these like wildlife refuges. So there's the vernal pools and other things. There are protective areas for wildlife there.
So
and
there's
as you
just like
pointed out,
endangered animals getting shot randomly.
I know.
there's
thinking about it.
salamanders dodging landmines.
Yeah.
Bullets.
Other than that, it's great. Other than that, is a perfectly well-suited facility.
That sounds like a side-scrolling game like Frogger, but with...
You like almost want to visit this place to see these little creatures and see what it looks like,
Yeah.
but then like the flying bullets stops you.
Yeah. So this was the first sort of official smackdown of the Sunbreak Ranch idea that has been offered. So the mayor has tried to like sort of placate them and just listen to them. There's been no real opposition to them because it felt like a kind of fantasy idea on the side. Nobody's really pushed back on it until the Marine Corps was tapped to provide this letter, and they did. Now, I gotta say, the Sunbreak Ranch dudes have one thing right, and that was this idea of like a triage. Like there needs to be an emergency situation applied to this, that we need to pretend, or not pretend, we need to accept that this is a catastrophe, not unlike a natural disaster, where there needs to be very visible and urgent response to what's happening. You cannot live with the way it is out there right now. And they had that idea. And I think that's why they started to get support. Then they also said, well, but after we triage it, we'll push them out so you never have to see them again in this camp. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's also been attractive to people, because there's a lot of people who just don't want to see this. As we discussed earlier, they are not interested in the daily violence to their sense of conscience that this provides, right? It's a very uncomfortable thing to drive to your office and see people living the way they're living. And so I think there was a very, obvious motivation that they move them out and have them. And I think it also provided them a thing they could say. This is what you do. The guy running for mayor, Larry Turner, he's a cop downtown. He's running for mayor, and his primary plan for homelessness is this: Sunbreak Ranch. Put him out there. Get him out into the desert. And I think it's become this like outlet. Well, what should we do? Well, we should do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's unfortunate, because I want all those guys to grapple with, yes, emergency. Yes, we need a place for people to go. But don't pretend like you can just put them out in a concentration camp in the desert. There needs to be other spots. There needs to be spots closer. And that brings up the last point. We're hearing a lot more about H Barracks. You know H Barracks.
Yeah.
So this is the area right next to the airport.
It's my spot for hanging out.
It's your spot. If you drive by the airport, there's all these like rundown, like it looks like a rundown, war-torn like area, right? Of like a urban area. Well, that's where the firefighters practice a lot of their work. Fire
stuff.
Right. That is the site of the future pure water recycling facility. And the idea is to bulldoze much of the buildings. The fire training site would still be there. Get that ready for the pure water facility that's going to be there in future years. But in the meantime, let people safe camp, safe park, and have congregate shelters, tents there that could, potentially provide a spot for hundreds, if not 1,000 people. It's a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And they asked, like, well, what about like that spot for your ranch? And they're like, no, it's too close to Point Loma. I think that like it gets back to this spot. Are we
It's
going
actually really far. Driving is close.
to Point Loma?
Yeah.
I mean,
if you
it's
walked there, that'd be a hell of a walk.
it would be you have to cross water.
Yeah.
There's bridges, but yeah, I mean, and there are homeless people. I hate to say it, there are people who are unsheltered on the peninsula. there's a few.
Peninsula.
So I think like but that's the question going forward. Are there more of these kinds of things that we can do, create that urgency, and provide places for people to go? Or are we going to let people continue to offer like this concentration camp idea on the side?
Yeah. I mean, I think that ultimately those kinds of ideas are what pop up when there's just absolutely no urgency or creativity to solve this most pressing of problems.
Right. Or it's not visible enough that if there is, right? That it's not obvious that the city's doing a tremendous amount to alleviate what everybody agrees is the biggest crisis. All right, well, that's my rant for the day. Appreciate it, you guys.
Yeah, I think you owe us like a therapist fee or something. We're not better help. We're like moderate help.
Okay. Fair enough.
That was good.
Other duties is assigned.
There you go. There you go.
You can check out all the discussions at PolitiFest. And I just want to give a shout out to the volunteers. We had a ton of students from the Price Fellows and La Jolla Country Day, and just a lot of volunteers, podcast listeners. I saw a lot of you there. It was great to see you all. Thanks you all.
Thanks for listening to us on your runs.
Yes, thank you. People have an intimate relationship, I think, with the podcast because we're right in your ears every week, and it just means a lot that you came out and saw us. And thanks to all the members who support us, all the sponsors there too. You can check out all of the conversations at PolitiFest at politifest.org.